So welcome everyone to Resume 101. I'm Parth and I'm super excited to dive right into this and give you all some great tips on how to build your resume up, really start from scratch and kind of just how do you get better at writing your resume, because your resume is the most important thing when you're going into interviews and even just getting interviews in general. So let's begin. So first off, why should you even be listening to me? It's like, just the basics. So my name is Parth. I'm currently in 3A Tron, or mechatronics for those of you not familiar with it. It's like a mix of mechanical, electrical, and software engineering. I've done 5 internships in the past, starting like literally in high school. After I finished grade 12, I worked at SAP Labs. Over there, I was doing IoT hardware development and prototyping. It was pretty interesting and very cool. Next, I was at Ritual. Over there, I was doing QA, some manual QA, as well as some project kind of stuff, as well as like a little bit of scripting here and there. So a lot of interesting stuff there, but it was a good kind of catapult into different jobs. And Deloitte was a great place to be after that. So Deloitte, I was working on machine learning as like a machine learning engineer, also doing a lot of prototyping stuff. Over there, it was more close to natural language processing. And then I'm sure a lot of you are more interested in my most 2 recent positions, Tesla and Apple. Over there, so at Tesla, I was working on the distributed systems for energy team. Over there, I was doing, well, distributed systems, backend, and really just kind of working on the cloud and being able to scale a lot of things efficiently. So all kind of very important topics, especially within cloud computing, and that was a great experience. Next, I was at Apple, literally just finished there about a month ago. And that was on Siri, working on automatic speech recognition. As you know, I can't really talk too much about that, but it was great stuff. It was pretty fun. And I've done a lot of like talks on internships, resumes, networking, interviewing, like pretty much throughout the last 2 years. I got started pretty early on that. And yeah, like if you have any kind of questions, even after this presentation for any of these topics about, Apple, Tesla, Deloitte, Ritual, SAP, any kind of internships I've had in the past, while of course, maintaining my NDA, I'm more than happy to answer them. If you'd like to connect with me, you can do it through my Twitter. I'm very active there. And you can also message me on LinkedIn. And yeah, LinkedIn, just the only thing to be careful about is the default is a follow button. So if you were in this presentation, shoot me a message. So when you make a connection request, make sure you put, hey, I saw you at Resume 101. So I make sure to respond to it too. All right, so I'm gonna grab a quick drink and we'll dive into it. So we're gonna cover a few different things today. It's not going to be a long presentation, but just kind of go over everything and make sure it settles in. So first off, we're going to talk about resume basics and kind of, what are the few things that you need to keep in mind in order to build your resume properly. Next, we'll be kind of applying those onto my different resumes that I've had over the last 2 years. So I've been very nice about it and I've kept every single one of them. So you'll kind of get to see how, it evolves over time and how it's not, perfect in the first spot, or, like in 1A, it's not going to be perfect, but, you get better every single year. Next, after that, I'll like share some general resources and tips. And in the end, we'll have a quick or pretty big Q&A depending on how many questions we get. So resume basics. So first off, the most important thing in a resume is having that structure. So there's a few different things which you need to have in a resume. You need to have a good header. You need to have relevant experience, projects, education, and skills. These 5 things is really like, they're the basis of making a good resume. Every single one of these need to be there in order for you to have a good resume. So a header is, making sure you have your name, your appropriate links there, your program possibly, depends on what kind of resume you're making. You also want to have relevant experience. I will also be talking a little bit more about this as we're kind of going over my different resumes, because, even relevant experience, like what even is it? How do you define this? Is it different from work experience? Like kind of just different things people aren't sure about very often. A big one is kind of just like, how do I phrase it, or how do I, like, in which order do things go in? which I'll also be talking about a little bit more in depth over the resume evolution section. And the next is, making sure you have education on your resume. So if you're applying on Waterloo Works, education usually will go at the bottom. But if you're applying externally, especially in the States, your education should be at the top, because the biggest thing that recruiters are looking for oftentimes is, when is the student graduating, what school they would go to. And if you're here at Waterloo, they want to know that you go to Waterloo. And yeah, like having a quick skill section is also very important. Now, as you see that there is no summary of qualification section, and that is on purpose because we do not use that in tech most of the time. So the only time a summary of qualification section makes sense is if you're like switching jobs. If you're going from like, let's say doing machine learning to going into product management, maybe a summary of qualifications will make sense, not even all the time. So if you have like relevant experience that you want to highlight, you do not need a summary of qualifications. If you have things which are a little bit more obscure and you want to focus on them a little bit more, or you want to really, really tailor your resume to a job with a completely different skill set that you like have in the past through your previous work experiences, then a summary of qualifications makes sense. So if you're doing any kind of software engineering, Mac or hardware, no, don't put it. But if you're doing more of like chem or civil, those kind of jobs, you can definitely put a summary of qualifications because it's just different kind of field. Next, the question I get a lot is just like, Parth, should my GPA be on my resume? The answer to that is that it depends. So the way I usually go about it is if your average is above an 80, so 80 is, if I remember correctly, about a 3.5. So if you're putting like your numerical average, 80 and above is fine. Or if it's above 3.5 or 3.5 in terms of grade points, then you can put that too. Anything lower, you probably don't want to highlight it. I see GPA as part of a booster into your resume rather than like a core aspect of it. And this is pretty much true most places. Another big thing, so now moving on to the other side of things, action words are huge. You'll see that through my resumes that I'm going to show off, and basically just see kind of, how do you form a sentence? How does it sound good? And things like that. Metrics is also a super important topic to make sure you're incorporating that in your resume, because metrics kind of highlight what the actual impact was and they quantify things. So as a recruiter or someone reading your resume, they get a better understanding and a deeper understanding of what different things mean. Of course, bolding is another one. So bolding, you can go both ways with it. Often what happens is if you have too much bolding, it detracts from your resume because then you have like everything kind of bolded. You're not highlighting certain things. So bolding is good if like you want to tailor your job and you're like, hey, let's say I have Kubernetes experience. I want to showcase that Kubernetes experience for this job. Maybe highlighting Kubernetes in that sense for that perspective makes sense, but it's not something that you definitely need to do all the time. I used to do bolding in the past. I've moved away from it just because I want to, showcase a slightly different thing. And I want to have more of a story building and storytelling aspect in my resume rather than, just like, I've done all these different things and you should hire me. Rather than that, I tell them this kind of story in your points. I, started with this point, then I did this, then I did this. And it's cohesive. So it flows from each bullet within a certain section. And a big one is one-page resume. So this applies mostly for tech and mechanical jobs. So if you have more than a one-page resume, don't do that because no one's going to read it. And another big thing that my manager at Apple actually told me about was think about what you want to talk about in your interview and then kind of work backwards. So what that helps you do is it forces you to think about how you would explain a job. And that way you kind of work backwards and you figure out what different points need to go on your resume. And you're always kind of going back and forth between what you're going to talk about in the interview, because what's going to happen is, the recruiter is going to pick it, or the person who's going through resumes is going to say, okay, this person looks good. Let's actually talk to them. They're going to have your resume out as you're talking. So what you want to do in that sense is go over the points you have, but in like more of a story and fleshed out fashion. So that's also a pretty good tip to kind of keep in mind as you're writing your resume out. So now for the front of a lot of like my talking, which is coming up, is going to be the resume evolution. So this is my 1A resume. as you can see, the spacing is a little bit weird, and there's a few wonky things, but it's not a bad resume per se. But there's just like a few things wrong with it, which I'm going to highlight just now. So what's good in this resume is the header. So you see my name clearly. You see that I go to Waterloo for mechatronics. You can see that projects is above experience. And you're like, wait, Parth, how does that make sense? Like, why is projects above experience? Like, no one told me to do this, this sucks. No, wait, let's hear me out. So basically what you want to do for any kind of role is you want to show relevancy in your resume. When a person is opening your resume and they see that you have the project that they're kind of working on, and you have like the same stack in the beginning, or you have the same skills required like right on top, that's a huge sell point, because then they're like, wait, this person did this most recently. Or as you're just kind of going through things, you are able to make a connection between the first point of their resume and what you're working on. So as the person who is making the resume, you want to put more relevant things up top. So for example, I was applying to kind of ML roles in like 1A, and I definitely like interviewed for a couple as well. However, just because 1A and machine learning don't usually go well together, just because ML requires a little bit more skill and a little bit more time spent, just practicing, doing projects, whatnot. It didn't turn out obviously as expected, but that kind of relevancy I still do up to today, and it has helped me as well as pretty much everyone else I've worked with in the past. So those are kind of good things to keep in mind. Order your resume through relevancy, not necessarily just the work experience has to go on top and there's no other way to go about it. This is also a really important point, especially if you're making switch. So for example, you used to do machine learning, but you're like, you know what, I hate machine learning. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do firmware. And let's say you've done a design team, or let's say you've done like a lot of side projects which are about firmware. You want to highlight those and you want to put those at the top, so that when someone reads it, they're like, whoa, this person has like relevant experience right on top. This makes sense. And I want to give them an interview. That's kind of the reaction you want to hope for. Another good thing I guess I did was having these different links. So as you can see, we have like right underneath my name and University of Waterloo, I kind of have the different things. So GitHub, LinkedIn, email, very important things to add. A lot of people forget them, so make sure you do, because the recruiter needs to be able to reach out to you in case they want to give you an interview. It's a little bit different through Waterloo Works. Often, they'll just kind of reach out to you over email or through Waterloo Works itself. But in general, those things are important, especially like GitHub for engineers. Especially early on. Later on, it matters a lot less, but early on, GitHub matters a good bit. So yeah, skills and splits. So as you can see, I've put down all these different things, and so as I'm a trans student in 1A, I didn't have like a crazy amount of experience, but I had done a few things, and I've like tinkered with a lot of different kind of tools, and I had like a good breadth of knowledge. So I was targeting for a lot of Tron kind of jobs as well, which is mix of hardware, mech, and elect. And so I was kind of maximizing my output from my resume and kind of stuck everything on there. Now that, once you kind of gain more experience, you become a little bit more targeted. You don't want to put everything on there unless you're applying for that kind of job. So if I was applying for more of a robotics job now, I would put down, my programming skills. I'd put down my embedded skills or firmware skills, and I'd also put down my like mechanical skills if required. But if I was applying to, let's say, a backend job or a full stack job, putting firmware skills and mechanical skills does not make sense whatsoever. If a recruiter is reading that, they see mechanical and electrical, and they're like, why the heck is this person applying here? They shouldn't be working here, right? Now, you might not think as you're applying there that they're going to like outright reject you, but that's just kind of how people think. They're like, oh, this portion of the resume isn't relevant, even though the rest was completely relevant. So you want to maximize the relevancy of your overall resume to the positions you're applying for. So this is my 1B resume. So as you can see, I put down my first co-op, went on to the top. Now I had like actual experience, which I wanted to kind of highlight. So there's a few good things, and just one kind of big bad thing. As you can see, I also flipped out my style. I used to use InDesign for my resume in first year, and then it got like super busy to keep up with, and then I switched over to using Canva, which I still use. And these are just kind of online tools for graphics. InDesign is like Adobe's, but Canvas is this online tool that you can use. Anyways, so things that I've done well, as you can see, education's at the bottom. So if I go back up, as you can see, like over here, bolding, I'm not overall like a huge fan of, because, you know, if you bold everything, it doesn't make sense. And it needs to be done like very specifically in order to actually like highlight the things you want. And so bolding metrics or things which are like highlighting. So let's say you saved the company $200,000. You want to say save company $200,000, but you want to bold a little bit bigger of the portion rather than just, you know, the number. So the bolding here isn't that great. And education, as you can see, I like just kind of list down everything I was kind of getting involved in, which, you know, was, you probably want to like flush it out a little bit more, which I started doing later on. As you can see, I fleshed out my education a little better. So now I have like introduced resume critique and mock interview sessions for residents. I told you I've been doing this for a long time. And, you know, I just kind of put down my courses, data structures and algorithms, deep learning, from like Udemy, calculus, linear algebra, circuits, blah, blah, blah. If you're taking data structures and algorithms and you're applying to any kind of SWE role, make sure it is on your resume. I've been to numerous Google sessions at this point. I've interviewed for Google before. Literally, the only thing that they look for, aside from, you know, the rest of your experiences, is that whether you have this one course, which is data structures and algorithms, on your resume, because it's a very, very key course in kind of how to think about programming and how to go about algorithmically solving problems. So yeah, next, contact info and portfolio. You know, it's a lot cleaner now. It looks pretty decent, have the links there. And you need to make sure that they're hyperlinked as well. This time, you know, my split of skills started getting a little better. So I have like framework libraries, embedded, other skills, and, you know, I was still putting kind of some of my design tools back in after 1B. But a cool thing that I was doing was having like this bit.ly. So what that was, what bit.ly will allow you to do is kind of measure the number of clicks that you're getting, see if people are clicking on your portfolio, resume, or any kind of other links that you have. So even if you have a personal website and you have like kind of a, you know, not a great link in front of it, or you're not using something like Squarespace, which gives you all the kind of analytics stuff, a bit.ly can help you kind of quickly identify where people are viewing your website from. This one is kind of a nitpicky thing where, you know, it's 3-letter Jan and then April is 5 letters. Usually you want to stay consistent. It's a very small thing, but some recruiters are really like annoying about it, and they will like toss your resume out because they didn't like how your dating was working. So yeah, basically just make sure that it's consistent throughout. Even though a big thing that people often mess up with is having like your, so within there you see Jan 2019 - April 2019. So you want to make sure that when you add a dash in the middle, you have spaces on either side and the dash is the same length as your other stuff. Very finicky people sometimes. So you just make sure you're doing a good job and you're putting your best self out there. Okay, so after doing my 2A job, this was my resume. And I believe I applied to Tesla with this resume too. So turned out okay, I guess. And yeah, I think this resume was pretty good. I'd still say it's a pretty good resume. I have like my relevant projects down there. I have my design team stuff, as well as education. And I also, you know, fleshed out kind of my experiences. So before I kind of, so the only thing that really got better from like from 1B to 2A was really just the kind of splitting I was doing. So now, you know, I was like, okay, I enjoy machine learning and I enjoy like kind of application development. So that's what I'm going to focus on. And luckily enough, you know, those are both kind of relevant. And sometimes people are looking for companies are looking for people with those kind of intersectional skills. So I made sure to put everything I knew down in those kind of areas. Another thing I think I did pretty well was kind of how I was phrasing my section. So kind of starting to build that storytelling aspect, as you can see, you know, like in Ritual, I am talking about bug tracking analytics. Then I go into like talking about analytics dashboard, but then you see, oh, automated testing for web application. That's like, you know, a little bit more, it's not flowing. The first 2 points flow together, but since it was like very, very separate role, it's kind of split. So what you want to do when you have, like, let's say you take on 2 different projects at a certain company, you want to add at least a couple points for each, just so you have a little bit more flow going. honestly, I don't think I'll still fix this, but it's good enough for where the storytelling aspect is really to like is the last thing you should really want to do. It's taking your resume from good to amazing, like hire, I want to hire you now, like please come work for me type of thing. And that's kind of the feedback I've gotten. It's a little bit less like applicable to more of the SWE and PM roles. PM, yes, it's storytelling is very, very important, but for like pure engineering roles where you're just, kind of coding or like doing engineering work in general, being super objective is also great. And you shouldn't worry about it if you can't like nail that storytelling aspect down. So this is my to-be resume. So this is, after Tesla, I kind of put down my different positions as well, my few projects that I had. And as you can see, you're like, oh, wait, Parth moved from like a 2-column to a 1-column. Why did you do this? So I wanted to move. So even though like my resume parsed properly on both like 2-column, I just kind of wanted to move away from that because I felt like I couldn't expand enough on my points. Because what happens is when you have like this kind of sidebar, you have to be able to write less for each point. And so as you can see, I was able to actually like flush out my points a lot more just because I had more space. So obviously, put down my Tesla stuff. And this time I feel like the only problem I have really with this resume is kind of the spacing. It's not great. What you want to optimize for is readability as well. So I definitely have made this kind of spacing a lot better now, which you're about to see just in a bit. But overall, you just want to have that kind of spacing going on just so that people can easily read your resume. They don't have to like squint their eyes to like find words. Like for me, I feel like this was a little bit too close for my taste for it to be easily read. And those are the kind of things you want to look out for in a resume, and not just dumping all that kind of information in your resume, everything you've done, but the more impactful information and readable information is what's key. So this is my current resume, and I think it's pretty good at this point. I'm sure I will be trashing it in like a year from now, but basically it is, I have my company there. Also, a big thing that you see is, why do you have experience on top, or why do you make sure, even for external applications, why do you put experience on top? Often what you want to do is like when you're applying through Waterworks, education goes at the bottom, but as I said earlier, for external, it goes on the top. What you want to do is if you have a lot of experience, let's say, you've been working part-time or you've been doing like a lot of projects or a lot of really cool stuff outside of school, whether it be internships, side projects, design teams, which have a big impact on your skills, put those on the top, regardless of, me saying education goes on the top, because at the end of the day, the relevancy is what matters the most. When a recruiter looks at your resume, the biggest thing that they want to see is relevancy. If that's one takeaway you go from here, please take it, because that is a crucial point to making a good resume. So just in general, I have my header. As you can see, I don't put my GitHub on there anymore just because I don't feel like it. I put my Medium instead because I write articles here and there. And I put a decent few. I think like my Apple points are definitely like phrased the best, just because they have like this kind of end-to-end storytelling piece. Whereas, compared to my Tesla points, they're a little bit more jarring, and they kind of just save everything I did rather than, frame this entire story around it. So just kind of reading through the Apple points, architected and built modular systems in C++ and Python using object-oriented programming for easier understanding. And as you're kind of going through the other points, you see that I've, give more depth into the starting point, but without being the same point. So talk about, okay, I worked with engineers and you created this framework and tooling. Then then the results. So like I was able to 5x our goal. And then, at the end, I was able to present all of this to a lot of people. So that kind of end-to-end piece was possible, not only because, I planned it out, but also because I had one project throughout my term, and it was like a pretty big, chunky project, which I had to finish. Rather than at Tesla, where you can see, I worked on Autobidder, and I had like and I also worked on like solar inverters. So there were two different things, smaller projects, which I did kind of over my 4 months, rather than, this one giant thing I wanted to finish. So that's not, you can't really do you can't do storytelling piece amazingly in every single section, but what you want to optimize for is making sure you have your header down, metrics down, and readability as well as relevancy down. So those are all kind of important things that you want to look out for. Another big thing you want to do in general is have metrics incorporated into your regular points. Metrics are super important. So if you go down to my Deloitte point, I don't know if you guys can see my mouse, but over here, I say leverage LDA, word embeddings, clustering, and other NLP techniques to pre-process and tag 1,000 plus documents, or here to save tax practitioners about 10 hours a week using my stack. And those kind of points, what you want to do is, even if it's just one sentence, did X by using Y and improved it by Z, or kind of in a certain fashion. I actually have a resource which I'll be giving out at the end of this workshop, which covers a lot of these things much more in depth. But I kind of focused more on the evolution, kind of how you should be writing and starting to write your resume. And this is just the kind of good things I've been doing. Design team, I just wanted to highlight the design team. So I want to put that down as well. You can put that down into your experience, relevant experience, whatever you want to call it. It's not exactly work experience, but it is still relevant. So you can put it down just under like an overall heading as experience, or relevant experience, whatever you want to call it. Skill section is a lot better in my opinion now, because I'm kind of clubbing tools and frameworks and kind of giving all the stuff I work on. I've given these kind of proficient and familiar tags to my skills, because I want to be able to show these languages I know really well, and these languages I know not as well. And so you want to be able to kind of give the differences in your skill set, as well as highlight the ones that you're good at. At the end, we still have like interests and activities, and the question I get a lot is is this relevant? Why is this there? Some recruiters don't like it. I feel like if it's not taking up a lot of space, throw it on there, because it's not going to hurt you. What it does is, when you go into interviews, it gives more depth to your character. I think at every single interview I've been to for a lot of the big companies, or at least like one kind of process, I've been asked about my interests and activities at least once. At Tesla, I got asked about like my singing and like playing guitar, and like he mixed it with whether I do Muay Thai together with it. It was just kind of like an icebreaker, but it kind of lets you not just be the work experience you've had, but also give a little bit depth to like you as a person and what you'd like to do outside of work. That's pretty much it for like the tech stuff. I threw my product resume here as well. So as you can see, I kind of just added a little product line, different things. This is a little bit older resume. As you can see, still have present over there. And yeah, obviously a lot more like general formatting for people who are interested in PM. So less like of the super technical stuff, and more of the product mindset, and incorporating that through even just your engineering skills. So like if you're thinking of making the switch from a software engineer to product manager, a big thing you want to do is highlight it from that kind of perspective, and look at everything you've done from the lens of a product manager. Like, what were the goals? How'd you get there? What were the OKRs? Did you do anything on the side? A big thing that I'd also say is, if you can join a startup or do something like, this is more so for product management. If you want to do like a startup on the side, you gain a lot of good knowledge on kind of how to do things. And so when you go to actually interviewing for product positions, you have a lot more depth and knowledge, and you can just talk better in general. And we're almost done. So we have some resources and tips. So this dive thread, let me actually send right now, if I can find it. I want to throw it in the chat. This has literally all the resources that I look at, as well as kind of a few other things. LinkedIn networking is also like a very important thing, as what happens is, when you apply to a position, you're pretty much just like blind applying, right? It's not the most efficient way to go about the interview process. What I recommend is, especially on Waterloo Works, reach out to some of the people from the company, and what they can do is, at least forward you out to the person who's looking at the resumes, or, hey, can you please keep an eye out for this person? And this has worked very often. I interviewed at Tesla in 1A, at IBM in 1A, at Deloitte in 1A. Like I got some pretty good interviews, but it wasn't just because I had a good resume. It was because I had a good resume, but then I also, put out a lot of effort into networking and pushing out, hey, can we like actually chat, and can we, go about how to do this, or can we talk about like actually doing an interview, or looking out for me so that we can interview, stuff like that. I've also linked my YouTube video that I did a while back. It was more so like a workshop for half the North, literally about this topic, and I go very much in depth. So please check that out when you have time. I think it's going to be a great resource. And that's also like linked in the dive thread. You also want to apply early. This is more so for external. So Apple, for example, will open their positions in August. Applying early will put you at the top of the resume pile because you can't sort by date time. And this is not, like an Apple thing. This is happening at most companies where, they have a lot of different sorting features because of the automatic resume parsing. So that's also another one that you want to look out for. Speaking of ATS, so ATS is, like this automatic resume tracker thing. What you want to do is make sure your resume parses properly. So once you're done making your resume, export it as a PDF is like how you'd be sending it out to other people. Then copy, like hit Control R or Command A, select everything, copy, and paste it into any kind of text editor. And you want to make sure that it looks fine when you're pasting it in, because that's how it's, when the parser is going to be working on the company's end, it wants people to look for keywords and pick up different sections easily. And if your resume is jumbling up some words or jumbling up sections, that's a bad thing. So you want to make sure it parses properly. And so those are two important things. I often like to attach my portfolio after or with my resume. So early I had like a 8-page portfolio. It was too long. So what I do now is I send it as my resume and I add 2 pages afterwards, which kind of have this portfolio. Now, a portfolio is not necessary to have, like, especially early on, but it does give you a little bit like extra space to show off your skills, especially if you have a lot of things to talk about in your resume, or, as you're getting into like your second year, your third year, you want to be able to highlight those skills. And it also gives you like 2 extra pages worth of, all these different skills you weren't able to talk about in your resume. Another big thing about resume in general and like creating a resume is that it's an iterative process. So while you're like improving upon it often and you're getting feedback from other people, optimize for yourself. Don't get too much feedback. Don't get too little feedback. It's something you're going to have to like figure out as you're going through it. But what happens is if you get too much feedback from a lot of different people, they have like their own perspectives about how to write a good resume, right? And they've had success from themselves. So while I've given you what's worked for me and some of the basic points which work for most people, you still need to optimize for yourself, and you still need to do a little bit of trial and error to really make sure that you stand out and you use your skills and put them out there in the best way possible. So this is the example of the dive thread, which I've already sent. So make sure you check that out. And basically it'll cover, like, it has like all the different things I look at. It has my Twitter and LinkedIn, I believe, attached to the end of it if you want to connect. And that is all. Thank you all for coming. Please, so as we go on to the Q&A section of this, please fill out this form as we're doing this, just so that we can get some good feedback and be able to run events better. This was possible through NSOC. If you don't know what NSOC is, it's the Engineering Society at the University of Waterloo. And we run events pretty much every single day at this point. So make sure you check us out. We've done your fees for NSOC. It's pretty good to do that. And yeah, on to Q&A. So the first one I see is, what did you use to make your resume? Word. So as I said earlier, I use Canva to make my resume. It's definitely not for everyone. I enjoy designing stuff, so it was fine for me to do my resume and like have this kind of custom thing done. But you can use Word or whatever you want. It doesn't have to be a fancy looking resume. It just needs to get the point across that you know what you're doing. Everyone, please like send your questions in the chat or like kind of unmute, whatever you want to do. Both are fine. We have a very active audience here today. Amazing. Um, no, we need more questions, everyone. Okay, there we go. There are the questions. Okay, so as an incoming student, what additional advice would you give? So one, enjoy your last summer because that is important. Because if you're coming to Waterloo, it's pretty much a nonstop grind forever for the next like what's going to feel like forever. But at the same time, it's like a super rewarding experience, and you're going to love it. But you're also going to miss having free time sometimes. So definitely enjoy your summer off. But if you can, after like you've had a good time, spend like a month or two if you can, like interning at some place, getting some more production level experience. And even if it's not like that kind of experience and it's not at a company, go to your local stores and be like, hey, can I like build your website for you? You'll learn a lot, and then you'll be able to like do more things and be able to put applicable experiences down on your resume, stuff like that. And I don't know if I answered that properly, but let me know if you want more clarification. So basically just gain a little bit of experience some way so that co-op hunting becomes easier. Why did you decide to put education first with PM? Not sure if I missed the explanation. So I don't think I explained it for PM specifically, but basically the PM resume I had given to external, and if it's external, usually I just go with putting more applicable like things at the top or education at the top because the recruiter wants to see that. It doesn't really matter after like a certain while where your education goes after like I'd say your third year really that much. But yeah, that basically just doesn't matter. Do whatever you'd like. Next is, what are some common frameworks and languages? Depends really what you're doing. There's a bunch of stuff for like each language really. Currently, a lot of the famous languages which are going on is C++, and Java are kind of the two languages which a lot of the tech giants will use. Go has been picking up in popularity quite often or quite a bit. Scala is another. Python, obviously, Python's probably the most popular at this point, and JavaScript. Just kind of your regular things. I think super applicable. What are your thoughts on including your phone number? Is it too much information? I mean, I put mine on there. It's fine. I don't think it's not absolutely necessary because most of the time you're still giving your number there. But one thing that you definitely need to put on, one thing, is your email. Okay, is putting your city address necessary anymore? Your own city and address? No, not at all. We have, as you interviewed for Tesla on 1A, what was it like to go on a second interview? Were you interviewed by the same person? So I can actually talk about both Tesla and Apple, as I did interviews for both. I interviewed for Tesla in 1A and I interviewed for Apple in 1B, and made it to the last round for both of those, and I didn't get the offer. So Tesla was the first time I interviewed. It was for like a hardware position, more of like a hardware testing position. Obviously, like kind of first year. It was good, except I didn't know my stuff for like a very small thing about like how exactly like, this Wi-Fi chip connected to the microprocessor that I was using. It was just kind of weird. I was like, I don't know, and so I obviously didn't get the position. But it was a good learning experience as I understood kind of how Tesla hired. And then for like that was hardware, and like now I did distributed systems, so completely different teams, although they were both on the energy side. It was pretty cool to go on a second interview because I pretty much made it my life's goal to at least intern at Tesla once after I didn't get the job in 1A. Can you give some suggestions on how to word my experience section if I lack relevant experience? So I'd say if you're lacking like relevant experience, the biggest thing you want to do is projects, because your projects will help you stand out the most early on. And that's the biggest thing you want to do. Like coming into university, you're not going to have a lot of experience, right? So you want to optimize for that by doing projects and like having a bunch of things which can help you. I actually have a dive thread on this if I can find it. Give me 1 second. Let's see. I usually do like just general kind of, if you want, general resources to help. Okay, never mind. I haven't flushed it out yet. So I would basically go on like YouTube, search up free code camp stuff and do it from there. That's kind of how I started out in first, like grade 12 first year type of stuff. How did you even get the entry for Tesla in the first place in 1A? It was a mix of connections and applying online. Obviously, you've got to do both together. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And obviously, good resume goes a long way. For winter work term, company apps open like August. If I can remember, so for winter, they start opening August, yeah. Actually, for next summer, apps will be opening in August-ish too, especially for the like this is when I say, you know, apps opening August, I mean mostly the American companies. But yeah, that's kind of things you want to keep in mind. Do you use any other platforms besides LinkedIn for applying externally? Not really. I just go on LinkedIn if I'm applying externally and just kind of find jobs there. But what I often do is like, I will also check out some really cool startups and be like, oh, this, you know, startup looks cool. And then I'll reach out to like the founder or something, or head of engineering, depending on how big it is. How many projects do you recommend to mention on your resume? It depends how much space you have, because, you know, you don't want to just absolutely put everything on your resume either. Let's say, so let me show. So as you see on my current resume, I don't have any projects here, right? I have like two extra pages dedicated to my projects now. So if you have a lot of like relevant experience, which is not projects related, just put your experience and add your projects into a portfolio, but there's no really set number. Just go for kind of what's relevant and optimizing it for yourself. Do you have any tips for creating a portfolio? Honestly, like I can show you kind of what mine looks like. It's not amazing by any means. I also need to be able to find it. Okay, let me stop sharing. And let me see where the heck this went. I have so many windows open, not even fun anymore. Okay, so this is my current resume, as you can see, and this is my project portfolio. As you can see, trying to make Waterloo works better because, you know, and then just kind of talk about all the different things I've done. It's not a crazy amount of projects. I have 6 here. Basically, I'd say don't do more than 2 pages. If you can fit, you know, more into 2 pages, that's enough. But just have enough projects to like help you stand out and give more depth into like your character, as well as like the kind of stuff you want to work on, like outside of school and work. Let's see, where can we get a resume critiqued? If you're in Waterloo, if you're like a Waterloo student, sorry, then you can, NSOC run, Waterloo engineering student, sorry. If you, NSOC is running like resume critiques. What I'm gonna do is I will, if you're all interested, I will, or if you're interested, message me on LinkedIn or something and I'll get you a link for getting your resume critiqued. Or, you know, if you're not a Waterloo student, just message me and I can help you with critiques. As a incoming, oh, I see, so you're an incoming student. What can I do to get myself software jobs? Software, you don't need to go to school for it. That's what I think, at least. The biggest thing that matters is relevant experience. If you are incoming mech eng, but you want software jobs, do software this summer. Like, build out your portfolio, learn software. That's the best thing you can do for yourself. By the way, cool, Steven, I'll look up for your name. Thank you. Amar asks, advice for someone trying to go from PM at a medium-sized insurance company to PM at something like Fang, Palantir, Shopify, Tesla, etc. So the biggest thing you can do is like, or at least for me, my route was a little bit different. I went from, you know, like software engineering and like finagling my way to being able to do PM and doing PM part-time quite often. I actually see myself more as an engineer or a product-minded engineer. So, you know, thinking and bringing product experience into engineering rather than, you know, like a product manager, like a pure product manager at least. So it's a little bit different, but I'd say the biggest thing you want to do is network. So next summer, applications are going to open in August. So you want to start networking in like 1 or 2 months so that when applications open, you have like all these people you've connected with and talked to. I would watch my, watch the how to land an internship through networking video, which is attached on the die thread, because that's going to be really, really helpful. I feel like I cover most of those tips. And if you feel like you're still lost, reach out to me again. But the biggest thing you can do for yourself, for big companies at least, is get a referral, because that's going to help you a lot. Do you think certifications online courses are substantial enough to showcase? Not on its own. They tell me that you've done the bare minimum. If you really want to showcase something, build a project. So let's say you take a course on distributed systems, for example, build something. Like build like a pub/sub messaging service, and like which one's on 2 different like environments or 2 different deployments, and then tell me, yeah, I put in everything I learned into work. That's what you want to be. If you tell me like you've just done a course, or let's say machine learning is a very popular one. People do machine learning courses and they will just like kind of throw that they've done Udemy course on there. Like, I don't really care, right? What have you done with this knowledge is what's much more important to me. Should your portfolio only be restricted to your personal projects, or could you include projects you worked on in your portfolio? For my older portfolio, I have one like one page which goes quite in depth into my work at Deloitte, just because it wasn't under NDA. Well, not a lot of it was, at least. But at the end of the day, like it really just depends on kind of what you want to highlight. In my opinion, most of your highlights should be coming from from the actual like main portion of your resume, and then your portfolio should be a little bit more different. Okay, nonstop answering questions. I hope that's helpful. I'm going to end the recording here, so I'm just going to say a quick goodbye message, but I will continue answering questions. So for those watching on the recording, thank you for attending, and connect with me on LinkedIn, Twitter, however you'd like. See ya.